I want to pick up a point made by Honberg, who says we were talking about Badenoch and Farage fight, and Honberg says, "Sorry, you use the term journalism in regard to GB News. Most journalists have morals." Well, I'm fully aware of that, and to that extent, I remember I I think it was in the Presidential Academy, which is sort of a university type place next to um, Engimo in Moscow, and I did a series of lectures there about the ethics of journalism to a journalist's to a journalist's course, and it was one of the journalists in that group who then asked me if I would be interviewed by a person called Irada Zainalova, who fronted a television program on the main TV channel in Russia, and HTV or NTV, and and the result of that was that I did a piece on Masha and the bear, and I did a piece on Theresa May or David Cameron, I can't remember. And certainly the Masha and the bear thing, I felt that I was I felt that I'd been dubbed, and I wasn't quite sure whether that was the case. And and later on, I took a I took a telephone I took a phone recording of the session, and so I was able to compare the two. And yes, indeed, I fake words were put into my mouth. And the problem here is that the words that I was supposedly saying, dubbed by a Russian actor, were not in the original interview. Um, and and when I asked to see the original footage, I was told that wasn't possible. I was assured that the words that had been dubbed, I think I was speaking in English, were an accurate representation of what I said. In the case of the interview about Brexit, there was something to compare, and I found it interesting that this came out of an event that was that I was part of, where I was talking about the ethics of journalism, and then I had an opportunity to actively identify a failure in the ethics of journalism, and I was then invited to go to the studio to meet Miss Zainalova and other members of the senior management of the station. In the event I went to the studio, I went through a barrage of last minute and quite excessive security to have tea in a staff canteen with an editor, a charming lad called Andre, who promised to arrange a further interview to correct the station's errors. He did nothing. There was no written apology. There was no explanation on air. And of course, the proffered meeting with the senior execs never took place. And I wonder if this sort of thing, which I would describe as deceptive dubbing, had already become standard practice by that stage. But it certainly has become standard practice now in Russia. And I find it very, very interesting that the actual that I was party to something which has become standard practice. So films, foreign films that go into Russian cinemas are now censored. There are examples of censorship in Marvel films, even at the time. And in Deadpool, another example. So the censoring that I witnessed was done by dubbing different words over an image, and this practice was given license by this very shabby journalism that I personally witnessed and was and was party to. So I am fully aware of the ethics of journalism, and I think GB News doesn't get into that. Isn't admired in that sort of filth. So yes, I use the term journalism for GB News, and I would and I would expect a lot of journalists in GB News are highly ethical, and even if they have a particular bias, that doesn't get in the way of their ethics. It may not be a bias that to which I subscribe, but I think it's wrong to suggest that journalists in the UK are not ethical. There is a strong sense of what is right and what is wrong about broadcasting, and when it is wrong, it's called out. And I think that contrast between the British position and, let's say, the Russian position is a good contrast to make, and something. And I don't want to be too repetitive about my posts, but I think it's it's a story that merits repetition because it exposes the unethical practice that dubbing fake words into somebody's mouth is one thing. Moving then into AI and to completely completely AI generated interviewers or interviewees, which is now certainly common practice in NTV in Russia. That dividing line between ethical reality, ethical journalism, and fictionalized journalism, non-ethical journalism. I was there at the beginning of that process, and I witnessed it, and I gave lectures precisely about the ethics of journalism, the need to find the truth, even if it's not something that squares with the bias or the prejudice of the particular channel, but that search for truth is a central part of the ethics of journalism, and to abandon that by using technology, and even there are ways in which technology is justified. So touching up a photo has long been an accepted practice. Using technology to touch up a photo, as for example with the issue with the Princess of Wales, that I think is people are being overzealous in their understanding of ethics. But certainly as you move over into Russian media, that anxiety about using AI to touch up photographs, to generate photographs, has long been past. And I don't think one can trust what one sees on Russian TV. And that is worrying, and we aren't countering that. And nor are we countering the nonsense which turns up occasionally on YouTube. I think it's the Times of India or something. That's the website. The Times of India is a good newspaper, the Hindustan Times, but the Times of India YouTube is simply a mouthpiece for Russian invented news broadcasts, and I wouldn't believe a word of it.